And now let's talk about climate change. And yes, I am going to be talking at some length about death and devastation and havoc and crisis. But do bear with me and do keep listening to us, because I'm also going to be talking to you about opportunity. We're going to have two of the top experts in the field joining us in just a couple of minutes to tell us how adversity can be also transformed into a massive, massive opportunity. But now, let's just take a look at how the weather has been for the past few weeks and the past few months. Yes, I know we've been talking about climate change, but look what's happening right now. First, there is an extreme heat wave in an area, even causing deaths. A few days later, that same area gets very heavy rainfall, so much so that there are often floods. If you think I'm talking about India, you're right, it's happening here. If you assumed I'm talking about Europe, you would still be right. America, spot on. Maybe China, or Japan, or Korea. Absolutely. Look, for many, many years now, we have been talking and talking and talking, and at the same time, ignoring climate change. Yes, it's one of those things out there. It's going to happen. But I'm not going to worry about it right now, because who cares? Yeah, it's going to happen at some point. But who cares? Let's carry on with our lives. So it's an academic area. It's some event in the future which isn't really going to affect us. But look at 2023. The threat exists. And the threat exists here and now. And it is affecting your life. It's affecting your life right now. Let's just take a look what's been happening around the world before we then turn to the situation in India and to the specific opportunity that I began by talking about. But let's just take a look at the world. Let's start off by talking about the heat wave in Europe. More than 40 people have died so far in wildfires in Mediterranean nations. In Greece, thousands of people, including tourists, were recently evacuated from Rhodes and Corfu amid raging wildfires. In Italy, the summer's been so extreme that people have died inside their cars in Sardinia, while Rome and other cities have seen record-breaking temperatures. In Spain, the heat wave is exacerbating a severe drought. This is the driest period in 500 years. Meanwhile, other parts of the region have completely the opposite type of weather. Take a look at Italy. In Italy's Veneto, over 100 people were injured in unusually severe hailstorms. Serbia, Slovenia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina seen deaths among heavy rain. Croatia witnessed its most intense storm since records began in the mid-1800s. The situation is similar, by the way, in the United States of America. The heat wave has led to Phoenix, Arizona, breaking its 1974 record of consecutive days with temperatures over 43 degrees centigrade. More than 15 people are believed to have died due to the heat. The party capital, Las Vegas, has seen record-breaking temperatures, while hikers have been found dead in national parks in Nevada and in California. In Florida, new temperature records have been set in the Keys, in Miami, in Fort Lauderdale. There's a patch just off the coast of Florida which is seeing temperatures of something like 38 degrees Celsius. People don't know, is it a mistake? Is it really possible that ocean water can be at 38 degrees Celsius? Can you believe it? Pennsylvania was struck by a severe flash flood which killed at least 5 people. Floods in New York and Vermont have led to large-scale rescue operations, delayed flights, train services have been affected. Mississippi was hit by a 1,000-year flood. Tornado and thunderstorm warnings were issued for... Look, I could carry on and on and on. I'm going to keep on flashing this for you. How much do you want me to tell you? It is clear that this is happening everywhere. It's happening close to home as well. Look at China. A new highest temperature record at 52.2 degrees in West Xinjiang. Heat in Japan's Tokyo broke a 150-year trend with temperatures 9 degrees Celsius above the season average. On the other end of the spectrum, the Chinese provinces of Sichuan, Henan, and Jiangsu were hit by heavy rain and flash floods. Does that sound familiar? South Korea saw massive death and destruction with around 40 people killed in the recent floods. Does that sound familiar? Because let's now turn our attention to India. 2023 has once again been a very weird year for India when it comes to the weather. This February, we saw the mercury rising to its highest point since 1901. Since 1901. In March, there was more rainfall than usual. Then April and May were unusually cool. They were actually cool months. But there was some sporadic rainfall. And then June, we suddenly had a severe heat wave. Between March and June, India saw 218 heat wave deaths, the highest in 23 years. Kerala recorded 120 heat-related deaths till June, the highest in the country. Other states with a high death toll have been Gujarat, 35 deaths, Telangana, 20, Maharashtra, 14, Tamil Nadu and UP, 12 each. Bihar, in fact, had the longest continuous heat wave of 19 days in June and recorded 8 deaths. And then, just after the heat wave, came the furious storms and floods, the same pattern that we've seen in other countries happening here. Over 100 people reportedly died in North India in 2 weeks till the middle of July. Delhi saw its worst floods on record. We all know about that. The Yamuna reached a 45-year high. Dozens died in Himachal, in Uttarakhand and Punjab. There were landslides, of course, in Maharashtra and Raigad, which killed more than 20 people. 70 remain missing. Gujarat's Junagadh then saw its worst flood in decades, while Ahmedabad airport was inundated. More than 35 people have died in Karnataka, which still has flood alerts in many places. Telangana also saw unprecedented rain leading to damage in homes and crops. And even in places like Rajasthan, flooding was reported from places like Jaipur, Jodhpur and Udaipur. Now this is Rajasthan, a desert state, but there's flooding happening out there. So put the pieces together. There are clearly extreme weather events taking place. They're taking place in India and they're taking place in other parts of the world. So let's not bury our heads in the sand anymore. Something is happening and we need to pay attention to it. We've heard this warning coming from the United Nations just yesterday. Everyone's talking about it. There's a tipping point that apparently is being approached. We're talking about the Gulf Stream being switched off. All sorts of things are possible. And if that happens, the extreme weather events that we are seeing will not only continue, they could get much, much worse. All right, you've heard me. You've heard me, as you've heard me, no doubt, talking about similar things for, 10 years and 15 years. And yes, you're going to answer me by saying, yeah, we know about it, climate change, something has to be done. But what can we do about it? So, okay, let's start now looking for some possible solutions. Let's start looking for things that can actually be done on a day-by-day basis, not just at a global level, but things that countries, for example, can do. And today I'm going to come up with one very simple idea, and it says it here, catch the rain. Now, this is something that the government of India has been talking about. Campaigns have been run. But it's time for us to start questioning why solutions like this can't be found that somewhere in the adversity that we are seeing, can there still be a positive? Because let's face it, when you're dealing with death and destruction and havoc, it's good to try and find some positives because at least it gives us something practical to do and practical to think about. So, why is this important? In the middle of all of this flooding, in the middle of all of this destruction, it may be difficult to believe that there are still areas in India which have had deficient rainfall. Let's remember between June 1 and June 2023, Northwest India saw 40% more rainfall. Between July 1 and July 10, some parts of all Indian states had excess rain. But by the end of this period, there were still a large parts of the country, 20 states, were still below normal. Till July the 23rd, East UP, for example, had a deficit with 29% below normal rainfall. East and Northeast India recorded a 23% rain deficit since July the 23rd. So, the point I'm coming to is, and this happens year after year after year, there's flooding in one part of the country, but other parts of the country are desperate for water. And the irony is that this repeats itself year after year because the flooding and the excess rainfall only happens during monsoon months, June, July and August. And at the rest of the time, India faces water scarcity. It's not surprising. India has 18% of the world's population, but only 4% of its water resources. Between 1947 and 2021, there's been a 75% fall in per person water availability. 75% fall. There's been encroachment on 19,000 of the 9.45 lakh water bodies that we have. Meanwhile, 14% of the country's groundwater assessment units are overexploited. 4% of them are in a critical situation. So what's the point that I'm trying to make? And I hope by the end of all of this, I've given you enough data to substantiate this. There is a water crisis on one hand, with too much water, with flooding, with excess rainfalls in some places and at some times of the year. But at other times of the year in other places, there is a gaping, grave shortfall. The solution is obvious. Start catching the rain. Start rainwater harvesting. Start figuring out ways that you can actually divert water from the excess to areas which have scarcity. Start finding ways that you can store water in times of excess and use it in times of scarcity. Now, how can it be done? And I'm going to come to the experts who are going to tell us in more detail as to what's actually been done already. But how can it be done? Common sense says, first way it can be done, canals and drains to divert excess water from rivers in spate. This will, number one, reduce the threat and the severity of floods, and will also then make sure that that water is being diverted to places that need it. Number two, have a widespread installation of rainwater harvesting systems, especially in urban areas. This can recharge the groundwater for times of need, while also preventing land subsidence and flooding. The third, the revival and the expansion of traditional storage spaces like temple tanks and step wells or baulis. This infrastructure already exists in many states, from Delhi to Maharashtra to all parts of the country. We must do it. We must also clear urban lakes and ponds and stormwater drains of encroachments. We must desilt them so that the water which can't be caught has space to flow, reducing the flood risk. And finally, we must dig new reservoirs in places which get excess rainfall and connect them with areas with less rainfall. This can help in reducing water disputes, especially between states in dire times. Look, with climate change worsening, extreme rainfall events are likely to get more frequent. There's a scientific reason for this. Heavier rainfall is likely in a warming atmosphere. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, and this leads to the formation of more droplets, so there's intense rain in a shorter space of time over a smaller area. So this will continue. Let's now figure out how to utilize it much better. Hey, India receives 3,800 billion cubic meters of water as rain and snow every single year. After evaporation, we're still left with, 2,000 billion cubic meters as natural runoff. Let's try and find a way of just using it. Don't let that water just go down the drain, literally. And to tell us how we can actually utilize all of this water better, we're being joined by the Mission Director of the National Water Mission, Archana Varma. Thank you so much for being with us, ma'am, and thank you so much for talking to us. You know, this entire dichotomy that we see, floods in one part, drought and scarcity in the other part, if only we could utilize that water better, wouldn't it be wonderful? And I know you're working on it, so how do you think we can do it better?
So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And yes, the Delhi rains this time and the urban flooding and the havoc that it has created has again brought forth the importance of catching the rain. So the idea is very simple. It is to nudge the states and through community-led participation to go in for water harvesting measures. And as you said, that, urban floods, even rural floods are a problem. And it is only the harvesting of the rainfall which can help India achieve water security by 2050. So before I get into what all can be done, I will give a little statistics to alarm you that though we have around 4,000 billion cubic meter of precipitation, the only utilizable source of water from wherever source, whether it's surface or ground, is only 1126 billion cubic meter. So you see that India has 1126 billion cubic meter, and it is said that if we don't, address both the supply and the demand side, we will be falling short because our demand by 2050 will be 1180 billion cubic meter.
Ma'am, we've done so many programs and we are talking about what to do with water. It's always been about conserve water, switch off your taps, don't waste water, don't bathe for a few months if you can possibly avoid, that sort of a thing. But conservation is fine up to a point. But when you're seeing flood water everywhere, when you're seeing Mumbai underwater, you're seeing Telangana underwater, Delhi floodplains being underwater, when you're seeing water gathered everywhere and that water literally flowing down the drain and getting wasted, you've got to ask yourself the question, surely there has to be a better way in which you can actually utilize the flood water, utilize the excess water, so you don't have to tell people don't drink, don't consume, conserve, just harvest the water more effectively.
Yes, very true. While the steps that you suggested, they are also very important. But in terms of volume, harvesting on rainwater, is very, very crucial that we harvest. We can only harvest the monsoon if our planning is proper.
Yeah.
So it all depends on proper pre-planning of the states or the municipalities or the local bodies, panchayats, the district administration.
Just interrupt you for a minute. When you're talking about storage facility, has there been a change of thinking on that also? Because once upon a time, it was often said that the only correct way to store water, you must have these big Bhakra Nangal type mega projects. Now, increasingly, a lot of the view seems to be that the traditional way is still good. The Baulis, the check dams, things that perhaps we've had for centuries. And it may be more effective to do this at the micro level, at the village or the panchayat level, rather than large-scale mass schemes. Would you agree with that?
See, I would not say that the dams have not served any purpose. In fact, a lot of progress of India is attributed to the dams. But yes, of late, we are slowly moving away from mega dams to these water harvesting structures, which is the focus of Catch the Rain. Like, there are two things which can be done in urban areas, which is being done in India to prevent urban flooding. As I said, first is to plan. And second, for urban areas, it has to be rooftop rainwater harvesting. And second is artificial recharge of our dug wells and bore wells. That is the only solution for urban flooding. I mean, apart from the new technologies, like you have sponge cities and you have stormwater drainage systems, you have green spaces and no encroachment, no pollution. Those are the measures which can be there. But the biggest technology which will work to prevent urban flooding is we have pre-planned our storage capacities through rejuvenating our dug wells and bore wells and rainwater rooftop harvesting, for which the citizens also need to contribute. So these are the ways in which urban flooding can be managed.
Thank you, Archana ji. And from our side, we'll try and do whatever we can to also change mindsets, which at the end of the day is what this program is all about. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure talking to you. Such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Well, let's now get another top expert to talk about this. Somebody who was one of the first people to start pushing very aggressively on how you can actually do catching the rain and water harvesting. Somebody who also has been doing a lot of work on how sanitation is particularly important on this, because you can't just catch the rain or capture water if that water is not clean. Sanitation becomes a very important part of this. It's a great pleasure now to be joined by Mr. Bharat Lal, who was former Additional Secretary, Drinking Water and Sanitation, the Ministry of Jal Shakti. He is right now the Secretary General of the NHRC, and also one of the people who believes that at the NHRC that, look, clean water, clean air, these are very much human rights, and therefore it is particularly important. Bharat Lal ji, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've been discussing water and catch the rain and rainwater harvesting for many, many years. I've done so many programs with you, so I felt that we must, of course, get your expertise on this. But even from the point of view of the NHRC and, as human rights, do you believe that something like water is at the end of the day a human right, and it is something which we should prioritize. You should have clean water, you should have clean air for that matter, and that should be a human right for everyone.
Well, as we all know, that a country like ours, where out of 365 days, we have roughly 20 plus minus 5-6 days as rainy days. And whatever rainfall we get, the idea is that you collect it, store it, and use it wisely. That is more important. So conservation means not only protection of water sources or basically using water efficiently. It means proper utilization, efficient utilization, as well as storage. Now, in Indian context, when we are having, hardly 25, 30 days as rainy days, whatever water we get, we have to collect it, store it safely, and use it for whole 1 year, maybe next year. Because of climate change, I think we all are seeing that we have high intensity rainfall, and basically which leads to flood. In fact, we also are having rainfall in unexpected drought-prone, semi-arid and arid region. Take Western India, Gujarat and Maharashtra. There are many places basically which were traditionally known as drought-prone. We are having heavy rain. It means we have to prepare ourselves to store, to catch that water, to catch that rainfall, store it, and then use it. The good part is that, like I have seen in Gujarat in last 20 years, a number of steps have been taken where basically all these water bodies have been rejuvenated. All these reservoirs and dams have been desilted and rejuvenated. So their storage capacity has increased. Now, your second part is that water conservation or water security does not mean just simply reduce the consumption. The real issue is that how to use the water efficiently. It means we have to learn about that part also.
All right, Bharat Lal ji, let me now turn to the question on which I have done a campaign with you just a couple of years ago. Water being treated not just as something which you have to try and conserve and worry about the consumption, but also how you utilize it better. Now, take a look at what we are seeing all around us on TV screens and the newspapers. So much flooding, so much water being wasted, and this is fresh water. There's an emphasis on fresh water. This is fresh water being wasted, causing damage and destruction along with that. How do we utilize this better? Just want to get your thoughts on that.
See, one thing, so when it comes to storing water overground, it has certain limitations. And especially if even in drought-prone and desert region, if you see that there are very few water bodies or few reservoirs. But second important part is that if we basically rejuvenate them, we deseed them, we strengthen them, I think you can store more water. That is one part. But second, untapped territory is basically recharging of aquifers. So if you have excess water and you have recharge structure, it means you can store this water underground in aquifer. The only precondition is that we have to keep our surface clean, means it should be open defecation free so that human fecal matter or contamination doesn't go basically in underground aquifers. So whole country has to work about basically on storing water underground. And when I talk about underground, is not only in basically underground tanks and rainwater harvesting structure alone. It is more important to store this water in unlimited aquifers. And lastly, I think we have to start respecting water. We have to construct, when we are taking real estate development or any kind of infrastructure development, we must see where is the drainage line, where water in what direction it is going, and best way forward is that a store over the ground and recharge aquifer.
Look, let's face it, Bharat Lal ji, climate change is here to stay, it seems. Rain bombs like we've seen in Gujarat, flash floods, flooding events, these are likely to continue. So we've got to find a way of mitigating it. We must find mechanisms that we can use when it is raining so heavily during the monsoon, that we mitigate the bad impact of that and yet utilize the water for times of scarcity.
Absolutely. The only precondition is that we have to, I repeat again and again, that we have to improve our sanitation. The Swachh Bharat mission, which has been launched basically whether urban or rural area, it has to be continuously, and basically it is in the hands of people. So we have to have clean water basically to take it to our aquifers. So precondition is that our water should not be dirty.
So Bharat Lal, the Secretary General of the National Human Rights Commission and the person who was additional secretary looking at drinking water and sanitation till not that long back. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us with that very, very valuable perspective.